Hello everybody, my name is Kyle Lee, aka Kilo Loco from kiloloco.com, and today we are going to be going over callbacks and threading. Now, I originally wanted to go over how to do URL sessions and make networking requests, but there are some things that you have to understand, which are callbacks and threading, before you can move forward and use that properly. So I'm going to be going over this today. Today we're going to be using Xcode 8.2.1 and Swift 3.0. Also, the skill level is maybe for like advanced beginners. This is getting a little bit closer to intermediate level, but I plan on breaking it down for beginners to be able to understand. All you really need to know are like the language basics of Swift. Have a pretty good understanding of functions and know when things are within and outside of scope, at least kind of know something about that, and then know how to use table views, because we're going to be using table views in this example, but I don't plan on explaining exactly what's going on, so I just assume that you already know how to use table views. Alright, so let's get into it. There's going to be two parts to this tutorial, just a heads up. If I can get this explanation out in less than half an hour, because my recordings tend to be pretty long because I try to be as thorough as possible. If it's less than half an hour, then I will go into a second part, which will be refactoring some of this code so you know how to properly implement it and not just know how to do it. So let's get into it. So we're going to start off with a new file, a new project. And we'll just do a single view application. Call it whatever you want. I'll just call this one, I'll call callbacks and threading, whatever. Make sure everything else is filled in, obviously. Swift. We're not going to be using any of these, so we don't need them checked. And then I'll just save this right here on my desktop. All right. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put in some JSON, because we're going to be using this as an example. If you don't know how to parse JSON or get a file into your project, I do have a video that you can watch. If you go over to my channel, you can check that out. All right. So we have this in here. So as we can see, and last time I had my text pretty small, so you guys might not have been able to read it on your phone. You probably had to watch it on a computer if you wanted to. So I have a little bit bigger for you guys this time. Trying to get better as I go. And let's take up the full screen so that you guys can get all the goodness in here. All right, so first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set up my storyboard, so we could get that out the way and done with right away. So I want a table view. And I apologize for any people that you hear in the background and dogs, but that's what happens when you live in an apartment. So shame on me. Alright, let's get these bounds set, guys. Yeah, get the storyboards going. And I think all we need to do is get this data source connected. Throw this in here. Call it table view. There we go. Go back to normal. Go into my view controller. I'm gonna just set up the rest of the delegates for it. So extending my view controller. And UI table view data source. That's all we need. Number of sections we're going to return 1. Number of rows, let's just do return 0 for right now. I'm going to set up an array up here, and then cell for row. So we're gonna I'll just do this right now. Let cell equal UI table view cell, whatever, cell dot text label dot text is going to be equal that until I can set up my thing up there, my array up there, and then we're going to return the cell. That silences everything else. So, right? You're tripping. Yeah, there we go. So now we're going to need to get some data in here. So, like I said, we're going to be using this JSON, and this is a list of users. Same list of users that I used for my parsing JSON tutorial. And as you can see, there is a name field in here. So we're just going to call that an array of user. Well, let's just do array of users, right? Because that's what we have. Or usernames. Let's do that. And we're gonna do this. We're gonna make it an array of strings, an array of empty strings. We're gonna go back in here. Usernames count, and then this is going to be user names index path dot row, and then yeah, so that should work. So I'm just gonna go ahead and run it just to make sure that everything looks like it's working. Let's do the iPhone SE. I like that SE on for the simulator. Actually, let me make this Kyle, Adri, Andy. That's my family. And if all goes well, this should work right away. Just want to make sure that we don't have any errors. After this, we're going to get the data in here, and then we're finally going to be able to get to the actual callbacks and threading stuff. Yep. All right. Looks like it's working. All right. So now I could return this back to an empty array of strings. And then I'm actually going to put all this stuff in a function because the way that I need to explain it, it needs to pretty much be in a function. So let's do get users. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab the information from our file. So let path equal bundle dot main dot path for resources. I'm going to call that some JSON. It's a text file. Else return. All right, we're gonna let URL equal URL file URL path, and we're gonna pass in our path. Get that back. Then we have to do the do try block, and we're gonna let our data equal try data, and we're gonna get contents of URL, and then from this data we're gonna make JSON out of it. So that's also a call that throws. So JSON equals try JSON serialization. And then we want to read this data, so we're not writing options but reading options, right? And we're going to pass in our data, and this is going to be mutable containers. All right, and if all has gone well, we should be able to print our JSON, and then catch, we'll just say print error. so still getting the basic setup for you guys. I just like going through all this so that you can see it from the beginning. I kind of approach these tutorials from the perspective of this may be the first tutorial that somebody's seeing and they don't really understand what's going on. If I were to just jump in and just paste some of this code, and I don't like when other people do that when I'm trying to learn. Let's see, did it print? No, it did not print. So we have a problem. And the problem is that I never called this function, which is something that you might want to do if you want it to run that code. So get users. You guys saw that. I didn't see that. I have a lot of things on my brain. All right, don't freak out, Xcode. I know what I'm doing. All right. So as soon as view loads, we're going to get users. We're going to get the path for this file up here, some JSON. We're going to turn this path into a URL so that we can get the data from it. That data can then be converted to JSON, and we plan on printing that JSON. If we can't get the data or convert it to JSON, then we'll get that error. Let us see. Finally there, and my JSON should be printed, as we can see that it is. All right, it's kind of small for you guys. You probably won't be able to read this if you're on, unless you're on a computer, but as you can see, there's pretty much everything from the file in there, so it's working. All right, let's stop this because my processing power is going out the door. All right, guys. So now we get into the part where you're actually going to be looking at callbacks. Now, what a callback is it's pretty much putting a function as one of the parameters in your function. So it's a function taking a function, and when you call that function on the inside of your code, that allows you to also do to write more code inside your block where you're actually using it. So it's kind of weird. I don't have a real good way of explaining it, so you're pretty much just gonna have to sit here and watch me go through it. So first thing that we want to do is, we know that our JSON is in an array, so we have an array of dictionaries, right? And I'm not going to be super safe with some of this JSON parsing just for the sake of time. So just hang with me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm going to make an array. And it's going to be from this JSON, and it's going to be an array of string and any and return. Okay. Yeah, the processing power is out the door, guys. I got to get a better computer, and this is a brand new computer, and MacBooks are extremely expensive. Should have went with the 16 gigs, but whatever. All right, so now we got our array. What we're going to do is we're going to also make an array of names. So var names, and this is going to be empty or equal to an empty string, or an empty array of strings. Wait, yeah. I just have to believe in myself because Xcode is letting me down right now. So for user in our array, we are going to get the name value, and we're going to append it to our names array. And we could do that by doing this. Put in name, and this is going to be as string, else we don't want to break, or we want to just continue, whatever. Make sure that we keep going, and then if that works, then what we're going to do is our names array, we're going to append the name. And then if all is good, then we should be able to just print out our names our names array. So let's go ahead and run that. No, stop it. Stop, Xcode. Work with me for once. All right, so for each user, we're going to add it to the names array. It's going to be a string. So instead of all this JSON we're getting back right now, I'm printing out the names, and it should just be one long list of names. And that's just parsing stuff, guys. You already know this. I know. I'm sorry. There we go. And we got our names. Good. All right. So now's the part this is the actual part where we get into callbacks, right? So we want to have this name. We want to have these names passed over here to our usernames, right? But the problem with it is that usually this code is not going to live inside your view controller. Like this code, this is like a bad practice to do your networking or your data here. And usually this would be done in some other file. We haven't gotten there yet. Like I said, if I have time, then we'll do the refactoring. It doesn't look like we're gonna have time though. Yeah, usually you don't want to do this code in here. So what you usually end up doing are callbacks. And callbacks are pretty much the same thing as completion handlers. That's something that I didn't know. So whenever you see completion in one of your, and like if you've already been doing networking, your function calls will already have something that says completion. If you ever see that, just know that's a callback. So we're just going to follow that same thing, that same pattern, and call it completion. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass in a function. And this function is going to return nothing. And that's all we got to do to have a callback. Right? So now we can say completion, and we can call it. But now let's get this, because it's changing the way that this function is working. And there we go. All right. So now we could do completion. So whenever this block comes here, this completion will be called. And now if I were to do get users, you can see that for the auto completion it says code. So if I press enter, it's automatically going to let me do code. So what this means is that the code is going to run just as it normally would, and when it hits completion, whatever code that you have in here is going to run like it's in here. Right? So if I do print, and let's just say hello world, and usually it doesn't look like that, but I don't care. We're going to check that out. We'll see how the completion is working. So you're pretty much passing in, you're saying that one of the arguments is a function, right? And when you have a function in here, that means that you can pass in a block of code. So just think of whenever you use this type of pattern inside one of your functions as an argument, that means that you can run extra code somewhere else whenever you call it. And it'll do everything in your function, as well as give you the ability to run your own code wherever that function is being called. So see hello world. All right. So Kyle, that's great and all, but what does this really have to do with our data? Well, usually this would be some type of networking service. Usually you're not going to be calling the data from a text file. You're probably going to be hitting an API, getting back all this data, and it's coming in a similar type of way. But you need to have access to like something like the names, right? The names array that we have here, and we can't do like return. We can't necessarily return it, because what usually happens in your networking requests is that it's done on a separate thread. Now I'll get to that in a moment, But first, I want to go over what is going to happen when we start trying to pass data here in our completion block and see how things change. So inside the completion function, we actually can put even more. We could put in arguments in here. So usually what you'll see are bool, and then you'll have like any, and Xcode is not responding. I'm sorry, guys. Let's see if it wakes up. There we go. Oh, what just happened? Hold on. There we go. Okay, so usually you get bool, you have any, and it's question mark, and I'll go over that right now. And then error, and that's also an optional, so we put a question mark. So what this means is that, hold on, let me comment this out so Xcode isn't tripping. Okay, so what this means is that when you call completion, you have to put in a value for each of these. It's mandatory to call completion because you can't call a function without putting in the proper parameters, and that's for any function, right? So when we call completion, I'll do autocomplete, and then I'll open a parentheses, and autocomplete should pop up for me as it will for you guys, and you'll see bool, any question mark, and then error question mark. So optional any, optional error. So for right here, because this was successful, what I'll do is I'll put true, and then the information that I want to pass to whenever somebody calls this function, and the information that the data that I want to pass is this names array. So I'll just put in names because it takes anything that I want to put in right there. And error, there were no errors, so I'm gonna put nil. And then I'll also do the same thing for completion down here in the catch block. And this will be false because it was not, I'm going to say false because this wasn't a successful attempt. The data that I want to pass, I'm going to put nil because there's no data that I really want to pass. But there is an error that I do want to pass. So I'll pass in the error that's automatically generated by this catch block. And there we go. So now when I try to call get users, you'll see that it has a completion handler right here, and it says bool, any, optional any, and an optional error. And if I autocomplete that and press enter, it'll give me this block. Now whenever you see something like this, you can usually press enter and it'll automatically fill it in for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and press enter, and as you can see, it took away the completion argument name right there, and then it replaced it with this. And as you can see, once again, it's creating this block that I can call. And what this means is that these arguments that I've already outlined right here, I have to rename them, and then I can use them, whatever the names I give them, inside my block of code. So I'm going to call this one success. I'm going to call this one, we passed in names, so I'm going to call this one names. And you can call these whatever you want, but this is the general practice. Actually, this would usually be response. So I'll just go with the general response. That's general practice. So if success is true, then I'll run this code. Else, and then I'll do if let error, because remember, error is optional. I'm just gonna do some unwrapping. If let error equals error, then I'm going to print the error. So I hope this is kind of starting to make some more sense, that I'm using these values here based off of whatever's being passed here. And since we've been getting to this point, I'll be getting true for success. The response will be the names that I pass into it. So it'll be an array of strings, but we don't know that because I put in the completion handler that it could be any object. And then error. So error is optional, so I have to unwrap it and then I can print it right here. I could have just done else print and it would have been an optional error, and I would have had to do the double question marks and then put in a default value. But since we did some optional chaining right here, I don't have to do that. So now what I'll do is I'll print out the response, and this will actually give me a warning because response is optional. So let's just get rid of that right away. And then I'll actually call it names. You could call it response again, and then let's actually, since we're doing this, I'm gonna do response as an array of string, else return. And what I'll do is I'll print out the names. So guard, that's not right. As, there we go. So essentially we're doing the same thing that we would have done down here, but the difference is, once again, like I said, this information usually isn't right here in the view controller. So you have to pass the information, the data, the names, through the completion block, and you can get it through this field right here, which we ended up we went ahead and called it response. We unwrapped it. We said we're pretty sure that it's a string, or else we're going to return. And then if it is an array of strings, then we're going to go ahead and print it. So we're doing essentially the same thing, but like I said, this block of code would live outside of this file. And that's just to keep it reusable, and that's just good coding practice, and we'll just end up getting the same exact thing that we got before when we wanted to originally print names. All right, so I went ahead and I'm building this, so when this comes up, when the simulator comes up, it should build, and then instead of hello world, because I don't think I have the hello world in here anymore, it's just gonna print the names as that array that we originally saw. Sorry for the wait, guys. I know that my Xcode is pretty slow. I'm going to be looking into some solutions to get this thing up and running a bit faster. But until then, bear with me. Alright, sorry about that, guys. I think it's because my computer's overheating. I'm in the garage and it's like 90 degrees right now. I've actually been sweating my butt off in here trying to explain this, but I'm gonna keep pushing through. Hopefully there won't be any more interruptions, but as you can see, it did print out as expected. I'm already half an hour in, so I'm not gonna go through the refactoring of this. Maybe I'll make a different video a different time, or maybe I'll do that tomorrow. The refactoring will be done, but it's not going to happen this time. So continuing forward, now we have the same amount of stuff in here, and I wanted to go over next what URL sessions is actually like, because it's not done on the main thread, and threading is just kind of like just think of all the different processes that are going on. You don't put all your processes on the main thread, or else when you're trying to use your UI, things won't be smooth. So it's kind of a bad example on the simulator, but yeah, as you can see, it's pretty smooth when I go up and down. But if there were a lot of processes running on the main thread, like if I was doing an API request on the main thread, this would be really choppy until the network decided to finish up the network request, and then this would continue to be more fluid. But that's kind of the overall idea of it. And what usually happens is that the phone will actually utilize a different thread. So URL sessions automatically uses a different thread asynchronously, which means that it's doing it outside of the main thread, and that it can run simultaneously as other tasks that are also being ran by the phone. So that means that you can still use your UI and things like that, and the phone can do all kinds of different stuff while it's doing things like networking requests. So what's actually happening when you use something like URL sessions or even like Alamofire or any of that, you're actually doing dispatch. You're dispatching the queue, and it's actually on I believe it's more like a global. I don't know exactly what URL sessions is doing, but this is kind of like a simulation of what URL sessions is doing. So async, and we're gonna do after. And you don't really have to know how dispatch works. I'm just using this as an example to show you what is happening, or kind of give you an idea of what's happening. And I'll actually go back and explain what I'm doing to simulate that. But normally you wouldn't have to go through the code and do something like this. All right, guys, sorry again, it cut out again. I'm pretty sure that my computer's just overheating right now, and it does not like everything that I'm doing. Xcode takes up a lot of processing power, and it's making it really hard to get through this recording. So let's hopefully see, and we'll see that it hasn't come back yet, and then it comes back because it took about 3 seconds for it to get back. Now, let's say that so now that we see that it takes 3 seconds before this code is ran, because let's assume that the information finally came back from the server, and we're going through this code now that it came back from the server, and we're parsing it, and now this completion block is called. It's called 3 seconds later, and then now we finally printed our names 3 seconds later. So now that we have our names, let's go ahead and we'll actually, since we know that it's an array of strings, we can set our usernames to the names in here. So self.usernames is equal to names, right? And then we have to reload our table view, which, do I have it in here? Yes, table view. Reload the data. And now what we should see is a very interesting thing will actually happen. When I call this, and I'm actually going to minimize this so that we could see them both at the same time. So when it comes up, it's called 1, 2, 3. It should have happened. Nothing's happening. Now, if I wait long enough, you'll get all this junk in here, and then all the information will be filled in. Now, what it's saying in here is that, let me read it to you because it's pretty small. Okay, callback threading. This application is modifying the auto layout engine from a background thread after the engine was accessed from the main thread. This can lead to engine corruption and weird crashes. Now, the reason for that is because we're doing all this stuff in the background thread. Remember that I said that we're doing this globally, asynchronous, all this other stuff. And if I run this code again, you'll actually see when we're getting this data. All right, guys, once again, it cut out. My Xcode and QuickTime are not working together very properly. All I did was added a couple of print statements in here so that you can see the order of operation. So we're going to call get users. Get users function is going to be called first. Then we're going to wait 3 seconds. We're going to assume that the network request takes 3 seconds before it comes back. Dispatch finished will be printed. We're going to go through this block of code completion. We'll see all three of these: dispatch finished, get users block has been called, which is this block right here, and then reload also called. We'll see all these three popped up at the same time, but we'll see this one pop up first. So hopefully QuickTime won't crash on me. Hopefully it'll keep going. Let's see. This is usually where it crashes. My computer is working really hard to show this for you guys. So get users function called 3 seconds later, and now all that information should be in there. If I actually move it, we'll see it appear. See that? And then we'll also see this junk called because it also thinks that it still needs to update this information. So let me go ahead and close that. So the reason for that is because, once again, we're not on the main queue and we want to get back on the main queue. Now the way to do that is just to dispatch, and we're going to be doing this dispatch. We already, like I said, URLSession is going to do this part for you, but this is something that you actually have to do if you're tying UI updates to your completion handlers, which is what you're usually going to do. So what you want to do is do dispatch queue.main.async, and we just want to, we're going to go ahead and delete that. We're just going to put this code in here, and what that will do, that is, it will come back, it'll go from a background queue, or from a background thread, and then it'll be put on the main thread when all this information is done, so that our completion block is called on the main thread. And I'll also do this for my completion handler for errors as well. So dispatch queue main dot async, and then we'll delete that code, and we just want to put this in here, and that's all we want to do, right? And now what will happen is when we actually get down into here after those 3 seconds, everything will happen the same way, everything will be printed out the same way, but since we're returning to the main queue, our UI will be updated properly, and I won't have to move it. You won't see any of this gunk in here, and everything will be working as expected. And this is how the API, this is how networking actually works, guys. So if you were to use URL sessions, this is how something would actually end up working. So get users function is actually called. 3 seconds later, all this stuff is called. It's properly updated. If we wait here, we're not going to get any gunk because we updated the UI on the main thread as opposed to a background thread. All right, guys, I think that's all I wanted to go over. My computer, I don't think is going to be able to make it even if I wanted to continue going. I will do a refactoring of this code tomorrow so that we can kind of see how we can break down some of this stuff, and I'll actually be doing it either early in the morning or late at night when it's a whole lot cooler when I'm recording, so that we don't get as many interruptions in our video. If this made sense to you, let me know that I did a pretty decent job of explaining it. If not, let me know that I did a terrible job of explaining it, or just ask me if there's anything else that I can go over in more detail that was a little bit confusing to you. I try to give you a realistic example by mocking up what URL sessions would do if you're calling an API. I just wanted to make sure that you know that you do have to do dispatch main queue, so that when this code is called, it's done on the main queue and you can update UI properly. You have to use the @escaping key, because when you're using Swift 3 code, it is no longer default to escaping. It's now defaulted to non-escaping. So you want to make sure that this is escaping, because the code that you run in here using these arguments, the bool, the any, and the error, which we have right here, success, response, and error, this code is running and living past the life scope of this function. So yeah, all this stuff is going to be run later after this function has already closed up, and that's primarily because the dispatch queue is running in the background. So I hope that all made sense to you guys. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, go ahead and reach out to me on Twitter, kilo_loco. And yeah, feel free to leave any comments requesting any videos that you want me to go over. I know that these videos are extremely long, but I try to be as thorough and in detail as possible for you guys. All right. Thanks again. My name is Kyle Lee, aka Kilo Loco from kiloloco.com. Bye-bye.